Summer of 2000, California goes dark. Not all at once. Rolling blackouts, they called them. Traffic lights die mid-intersection. Cars piling into each other because nobody knows who has the right of way. Elevators stop between floors. Hospitals switch to backup generators to keep people on life support from flatlining. Politicians go on TV and say it's a crisis. California's growing too fast, they say. Not enough power plants, not enough supply. It's a perfect storm. But 1,500 miles away in a glass tower in Houston, there's no crisis. There's a party, a room full of traders in their 20s, expensive suits, glowing screens. They're on the phone, and they're laughing. We know exactly what they were saying, because the FBI eventually got the tapes. On one recording, a trader is watching the news. There's a wildfire tearing through California, threatening a major transmission line. If that line burns, the power gets cut. And when the power gets cut, the price goes through the roof. The trader says, "Burn, baby, burn." On another tape, two traders are joking about how much money they're pulling out of California. One of them says, "They're fucking taking all the money back from you guys? All the money you guys stole from those poor grandmothers in California?" His buddy laughs. "Yeah, Grandma Millie, man. But she's the one who couldn't figure out how to fucking vote on the butterfly ballot." They're not just profiting off a disaster. They're causing it. They figured out how to hack the power grid of the 7th largest economy in the world. And they're turning off the lights just to watch the numbers on their screens go up. I'm James Tudor. This is The File on Enron. Enron didn't start as a Wall Street villain. It started as a boring natural gas pipeline company. But in the 1990s, their CEO, Jeffrey Skilling, had a different vision. He didn't want to just move energy from point A to point B. He wanted to trade it, like stocks, like commodities. And in 1996, California handed him the keys. The state deregulated its electricity market. The pitch was simple. Competition lowers prices. Let the free market work its magic. Electricity would be bought and sold on an open exchange, fluctuating by the hour based on supply and demand. In theory, it made sense. In practice, it created the perfect conditions for a heist. Because electricity isn't like other commodities. You can't stockpile it in a warehouse. You can't store it for later. It has to be consumed the instant it's generated. If supply drops even slightly below demand, the whole grid starts to collapse. And when the grid is collapsing, people panic. Hospitals, schools, traffic lights, everything stops. Enron looked at this new system and saw something nobody else did. If you could artificially create a shortage, if you could make it look like there wasn't enough power, the price wouldn't just go up. It would go to infinity, because a city will pay anything to keep the lights on. So Enron built a massive trading floor in Houston. They recruited the smartest, most aggressive kids straight out of business school, paid them million-dollar bonuses based on one metric: profit. Not customer satisfaction, not reliability, just profit. And then they told them, find the loopholes. The schemes Enron's traders came up with were so brazen they gave them comic book names. There was Fat Boy, Get Shorty, and the crown jewel, Death Star. Here's how Death Star worked. Let's say Los Angeles desperately needs power. Demand is high, supply is tight. Enron buys electricity inside California at a normal price. But instead of delivering it to LA, they route it out of state, maybe to Oregon, maybe to Nevada. Just get it out. Now California's grid operator sees the supply drop. They start to panic. They issue an emergency alert. They're begging anyone with power to sell, and they're offering astronomical prices to get it. That's when Enron steps back in. They take the exact same electricity they just moved out of California, sell it back to the state at a 1,000% markup, and pocket the difference. They called it megawatt laundering. But it gets worse. What if there's actually plenty of power being generated? Then the price stays low. No panic, no profit. So the traders picked up the phone. They started calling independent power plants scattered across California. The conversation would go like this. Hey, we need you to take your plant offline today. Scheduled maintenance. But the plant's running fine. The grid needs the power. We'll pay you more to stay offline than you'd make generating electricity. And the plant would shut down. Not because it was broken, because Enron paid them to break it. They weren't exploiting a crisis. They were engineering one. By early 2001, the numbers had become obscene. In 1999, wholesale electricity in California cost about $30 per megawatt hour. Normal, stable. By the height of the Enron engineered crisis, it hit $1,000 per megawatt hour. The state was hemorrhaging money. Small businesses couldn't pay their electric bills and shut down. The two major utility companies, Pacific Gas and Electric, one of the state's massive utility companies, was forced into bankruptcy. Southern California Edison was pushed to the absolute brink of collapse. They were forced to buy power at extortion prices, but weren't allowed to pass the full cost to consumers. The state government had to step in with billions in taxpayer money just to keep hospitals running. People were dying. Traffic accidents spiked because streetlights were out. Elderly people in the Central Valley were hospitalized for heat stroke because their air conditioning kept cutting out in 100-degree weather. And in Houston, the Enron executives were doing victory laps. Jeffrey Skilling was on magazine covers, hailed as a visionary. At a corporate event in Las Vegas, someone asked him about the California crisis. He smirked and said, "What's the difference between California and the Titanic? At least when the Titanic went down, the lights were on." The room laughed. It wasn't a business strategy. It was contempt. To the traders staring at green numbers on black screens, the people sitting in the dark weren't real. They were just Grandma Millie. They were punchlines. Here's the twist. Enron was stealing billions from California, and they were still broke. The entire company was a fraud. They were using an accounting trick called mark-to-market, which let them book future hypothetical profits as real money today. They hid debts in offshore shell companies with names like Jedi and Raptor, straight out of Star Wars and Jurassic Park. Like this was all a game. The California energy crisis wasn't a sign of Enron's genius. It was a sign of desperation. They needed the immediate, massive cash flow from extorting an entire state just to keep their house of cards from collapsing. In late 2001, a few journalists and analysts started asking uncomfortable questions about Enron's balance sheets. The stock price, once the darling of Wall Street, started to slip. Then it cracked. Then it free fell. Inside the Houston headquarters, panic set in. The same executives who had laughed at California started frantically cashing out their stock options. Meanwhile, they locked rank-and-file employees out of their retirement accounts, trapping them in Enron shares that were about to become worthless. And the shredders started running 24 hours a day. But it wasn't just Enron trying to hide the bodies. It was their accountants. Arthur Andersen was one of the 5 largest auditing firms in the world. They were supposed to be the independent watchdogs. Their only job was to look at the books and tell the public the truth. But Enron was paying them tens of millions of dollars a year in consulting fees. So when the government started asking questions, Arthur Andersen didn't blow the whistle. They panicked. They ordered their staff to destroy the files. Mountains of documents, thousands of emails, gone. The watchdog wasn't barking, it was eating the evidence. Enron filed for bankruptcy in December 2001. At the time, it was the largest corporate collapse in American history. 20,000 employees lost their jobs and their life savings. Retirement accounts that had been worth hundreds of thousands were suddenly worth nothing. Jeffrey Skilling went to prison. Ken Lay, the CEO, was convicted but died of a heart attack before sentencing. The company was dismantled and sold for parts. But the damage to California was permanent. The state lost somewhere between $40 billion and $45 billion during the manufactured crisis. Businesses closed, lives were ruined, people died. And the traders on those tapes, the ones laughing about Grandma Millie and cheering for forest fires, most of them walked. A few took plea deals for minor charges, but the majority moved on quietly to hedge funds, private equity, other trading firms. They're still out there. The Enron story is usually taught as a cautionary tale about accounting fraud, about corporate greed, about the dangers of deregulation. But that's the sanitized version. The real lesson is darker. It's the realization that the power grid keeping your hospital running, your traffic lights working, your home livable, it's not controlled by engineers or public servants. It's controlled by a market. And somewhere in that market, right now, there's a guy in a suit staring at a screen, trying to figure out how to get rich by turning your lights off. I'm James Tudor. This is Empire Archives. Subscribe.